Hello, my name is Todd Caldwell. I'm Director of Audit Services with the Indiana State Board of Accounts, specializing in cities and towns. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this training. If you're new to your position and you've not been through an audit before, we want to take this opportunity to discuss the basics of what to expect when we come to do an audit and what you can do now to prepare for such a visit. Let's start with what's required to be audited by the State Board of Accounts. It's found in Indiana Code 5-11-1-9, and it requires an examination of all accounts and financial affairs of every public office and officer. Federal grants also commonly require an annual financial audit. And you might have some debt issuances with your city or town. Most financial institutions and bond rating agencies like Standard & Poor's or Moody's, they want to have audited financial statements, and they may have specific requirements for them. Most banks and rating agencies will accept our audit reports to satisfy their audited statement requirements. The goals of an engagement are to provide an opinion as to the material correctness of your financial statements as presented. An unmodified opinion means no modifications have been made to our opinion. The financial information is materially correct. This is what you want. A modified opinion lets the reader know there are reasons that need to be taken into consideration when relying on the financial statement information. Provides the reader with non-compliance of any federal requirements if an audit of your major federal programs is being conducted. For those cities and towns who spend at least $750,000 in a year in federal assistance, then we'll audit those federal grants. And those audit reports will have two sections. So those federal audit reports will have two sections. The first being the financial statement part of it. But then we get into section 2, which are findings related to financial statement compliance. And also section 3, which are the findings that are related to specific major programs. State grant noncompliance will be reported in what's referred to as a supplemental report, meaning it's supplemental to your financial statement audit report that we just talked about. It's a separate report. And the results and comments contained in the supplemental report are related to statutory or uniform compliance guideline noncompliance. And finally, the last goal is to provide management with less significant noncompliance of state requirements through the issuance of a management letter. These are items that we want to bring to management's attention that don't rise to the level of needing to be included in the audit report. Before we start an engagement, we need to gather some general information or update information we have from the prior audit. To do so, we have a few forms that we use to record or document the information. As of the recording of this video webinar, we are sending electronic copies of the forms you will see on the screen. We're sending those to you. In the very near future, probably in the first half of 2020, the plan is to gather most of, if not all, this information through Gateway in the format of questionnaires and write-in answers. Because today we're still using the forms, I'll briefly explain that process. There is a separate video you can watch that covers these forms in more detail, including pictures of what each of them look like and a little more explanation. As auditors, we are required by the standards we audit under to obtain certain information and document that we have done so. And these forms are how we do that. We send these forms to you prior to the start of an audit so that we can better understand how your specific city or town operates. That allows us to plan our audit procedures based on what controls you have or don't have in place. Form 7 will capture a general understanding of your city or town and some of the controls that you have. Form 9 goes more in depth, also taking into account your environment. Like if you are a growing community with businesses popping up all around, or if you're experiencing declines in employment opportunities, population, etc. Form 45 looks in depth at significant audit areas like cash or receipts. We'll capture what your controls are for each. For cash, it'll be like how is cash handled, who's involved in that process, and what functions do they perform. Form 13 is used to gain your acceptance of responsibility over the financial statements. When you will complete the annual financial report in Gateway, and you'll hear a lot more about that in other training, the financial data is compiled by the State Board of Accounts into your actual financial statements that we audit. Independence rules prohibit us from compiling statements for you and simply turning around and auditing what we've just compiled without some acceptance by you acknowledging that the data we compiled is the actual financial information you reported. Again, more in-depth discussion in the separate video on the forms we sent out prior to an audit can be found on the YouTube page. This whole engagement process gets officially started with the entrance conference. The entrance is the official beginning of the engagement. We may have already been in your offices a day or two because scheduling a meeting sometimes isn't that easy, but we do try to have this entrance conference before the audit starts or as close to the start as possible. But when we have this meeting, that's when you know it's go time. We're there and things are getting started. Who is invited? Well, we invite those charged with governance, which is the governing bodies. So it would be a council president, a board of works in a city, a mayor. Those different governing bodies get invited to the entrance conference. We also invite management, which is represented either by a clerk treasurer or a controller. And if you have deputies of either, those can come too. In a town or a city, include the town manager or the city manager if you have one. What is discussed? Well, first is the introduction to the field examiners that are going to be working on the audit. Then there's a general overview of our audit objectives, management's responsibilities, like being responsible for the financial statements, identification of federal awards, establishing internal controls, following laws, making records available, getting records, that kind of thing. We'll also discuss audit procedures, general audit procedures, those related to internal controls, and those related to compliance issues. We'll also be informing management of the general records that will be requested and when the audit will begin and the expected issuance date. Expectations will be discussed because the entrance conference establishes and informs attendees of a method for open and continued communication throughout the entire engagement. Like, how would management and governance like to communicate? Do you want us to call you? Do you want us to shoot an email? Can we just walk into your office? Do you want to schedule periodic, repetitive meetings? That kind of thing. The field examiner will also be explaining the objectives of the engagement and the responsibilities of management and governance. The field examiners will also inform management of the audit fees and answer any question regarding the audit process. Then there's a form you're going to sign at the entrance. It's our internal form number 14 that details all of this, and you can request a copy for your records if you wish. So what are some of the things you can do to prepare for our arrival and maybe save yourself some time? Remember, any time that you can save related to an audit is that much less you're going to get billed for. So first is the financial ledger. That sounds simple enough, but have it ready after year end. Save and make backups if your ledger is computerized. If you can save Excel documents, you can do that before we arrive also. And if you have hand-posted ledgers, make sure all the pages are complete and together. Bank statements and reconcilements, have all of them completed and together. If those are done electronically, make sure we will have access to any online banking materials. If a matter of getting online to view things, we'll need to do that in your presence, like maybe sit down with you while you log in if we need to see the images of canceled checks that are only available online. Claims, receipts, supporting documentation, have all the claims filed in order and ready for our arrival with the supporting documentation attached. If your claims are electronic, make sure the electronic files have been backed up and that we can have a file we can utilize. Minutes of meetings, include those to the current date for all your boards, your council, your board of works, your park, your redevelopment commission, all of those. Ordinances and resolutions, have copies of any new ones during the audit period together. That's always helpful. And contracts, any pertinent ones you know we'll want copies of can be ready when we walk in. Policies and procedures, that would include your internal controls. That can be given to us at the start, your personnel policies, any travel policies, vacation, cell phone policies. Those things are a good thing to have ready because we will be asking for them eventually. Financial reports, any that are filed with state or federal government, you can have copies together in one place that you can just hand us when we walk in. Grant documents and especially the applications are always important, especially if we're doing a federal audit. Sometimes a great deal of time is spent just tracking those down during an engagement, so if you can have them ready for us, that's going to save some time. And finally, workspace. And even though it's not on your slides, it's an important thing for us to have. So if you can have a plan on where we're going to work, if we're on site, that can save some time. We don't always give much, if any, advance notice. So if you have a general plan in mind where we're going to be working, that can save some time in prepping it for us. I've been on audits where I've been in one place when I showed up because another place wasn't ready. So that moving from one place to another, maybe to another, just takes more time. And that's time that you end up being billed for. We might conduct some audits remotely, meaning we will be at a central location, maybe our Indianapolis office or spots across the state, and we will contact you through Gateway and request certain information that you'll upload. We will be on site occasionally during those times, but we won't be there every day like on an on-site audit. So the field examiners can explain that to you. You will still have an entrance conference in person, even if we're auditing remotely. And then we'll go back to our central location, do that audit, maybe come on site to look at some physical documents that maybe can't be easily transmitted electronically, and then we'll conclude the audit. Federal audits, or sometimes called single audit. It starts with the schedule of federal expenditures. So that comes from the information input into Gateway when you're doing the annual financial report. So the accuracy of this schedule is very important. If you've got questions about whether a grant is federal when you're completing the annual report and this particular schedule, contact your grantor agency. So if you get the money from a state department or agency, you want to contact them to find out if that grant has a federal component to it. Obviously, if you get it directly from the federal government, it'll be one that you list in this section. But the schedule of expenditures of federal award to the CFA in the annual report is only for federal grants, federal assistance. If you leave a federal grant off of this schedule or you include one that's not federal, it can increase our audit time. Then we'll do a selection of major programs. What a major program is we won't audit every grant that you have, but let's say you have 10 grants and 3 of them are very, very large programs. We select what's called a major program based on various attributes and thresholds. The thresholds are based on dollar amount and risk assessment. and we'll audit those as major programs. So we would focus or probably only look at those 3 major programs in that example. We aren't going to audit every federal program that you have, only those that the auditor considers to be major. And then audit of major programs. Those audit procedures are performed to determine compliance with federal grant requirements. Each grant has a set of compliance requirements, and all federal programs have general requirements that we audit for. We also want to know what's happened after the audit period. Sometimes financial transactions or events occur after the end of an audit period that can have a significant impact on your statements. If the reader of your financial statements were to only see the dollars on your statement, it could be misleading unless a subsequent event is taken into consideration. Therefore, we're going to look for certain items that might happen after the audit period, but before our audit is issued, to see if any of those might be material to the financial statements. If any are noted, we'll recommend you include a footnote to your financial statements. Probably the most common subsequent event is debt. Debt issued after the date of the financial statements can be significant information, and if not properly disclosed, could make the statements themselves misleading. Other items we're going to look for are any changes in financial situation, any lawsuits filed against your governmental unit. We have you request information from your attorney and can use that as a basis if any lawsuits are material and need to be disclosed. And then we'll look at other material situations. The field examiner will review records subsequent to the engagement period looking for these things, so they will most likely ask for minutes from meetings, or they may sit down with you and ask specific questions in that subsequent period. As I said a second ago, any material items noted by the field examiner will be discussed with you, and a note to the financial statements will be recommended. So at this point in an audit, we've identified risks, we've planned our audit procedures, we've done our testing, now we're ready to conclude our field work. We now have enough audit evidence to form an opinion on whether your financial statements are materially stated. As I mentioned previously, one of the goals of the engagement is to provide our opinion as to the material correctness of the financial statements as presented. When determining our opinion, we will have an unmodified or a modified opinion. An unmodified opinion means no modifications have been made to our opinion. Your financial information is basically and materially correct. A modified opinion lets the reader know that there are reasons that need to be taken into consideration when relying on financial statement information. The opinion will be in the financial statement report issued by the Board of Accounts with your financial statements and other financial information. In some instances, you might have a review and not a quote-unquote audit. A review is almost the same as an audit, but our testing procedures are fewer, and we don't issue an opinion on the financial statements in a review. Rather, we issue a conclusion that no material modifications are needed to your financial statements. Or we may just do a compliance engagement. And in a compliance engagement, we test for compliance with certain statutory procedures. Your financials will not be in our audit report, only the ending cash balance of all of your funds. It makes reference to the annual financial report on Gateway, and typically we only do that in very small towns that don't have debt or any other reporting requirements. Next, we're going to compile all significant and impactful issues of noncompliance. We call those results and comments, or sometimes audit results and comments. We'll also compile any federal findings for inclusion in the report. The results and comments not related to federal grants are going to be in the separate supplemental report, which supplements the financial statement report. The compliance report will only have non-compliance exceptions listed in it per your plus your financials if we're doing a compliance engagement. If we're doing a review that I mentioned in the slide back, that report will have findings, and the reader is referred to Gateway for the annual financial report. Next, we might compile a management letter comments. Management letters contain any results and comments that were not significant or impactful to the unit. This is intended for management only, and it will not be published on our website. So for example, if we're testing 100 claims or accounts payable vouchers, and 2 of them didn't have a signature that was required, that wouldn't be significant enough to make it into the audit report. We might put that in the management letter to let management know that while you did have internal controls in place, a couple of claims slipped through that were unnoticed, didn't have the required signatures, and instruct you to take action to correct that situation. To wrap things up, the field examiner will have their work reviewed and set up the exit conference. The first review is conducted by the audit manager. Each audit is assigned a manager that oversees the field work and the draft report. They perform an initial review to determine if the report meets standards and SBOA formats. Once that's been done, the exit conference is planned and scheduled. Who gets invited to the exit conference? Well, the audited official, which is a city or town, is the clerk, treasurer, or controller. Those charged with governance are invited. So all the council members are invited to the exit. Other management positions are invited, as well as any prior officials. If the audit period included times when your predecessor was in office. What kind of things are discussed? The draft report is available to review and is discussed. That includes the financial statements and the federal report. We'll also go over the supplemental report if one exists. And you'll be provided draft copies of any written comments. If there's a management letter, the contents will also be discussed. The official's term, email, and physical addresses are verified so that we can send you the completed report when it's filed. And this is your opportunity to ask any questions if you're not clear on anything the examiner's talked about. So don't leave the exit conference if you still got questions. The examiners are there to make everything as clear as possible to you. So don't be afraid to, if you don't understand a procedure or something, to go over that with them before you leave. Then there are some options to respond. A city or town is required to provide a corrective action plan to federal findings during an audit. And cities or towns have the option of providing a written response to the exceptions noted in the supplemental compliance report. And that's due to be in our office within 10 days. If it's longer than 10 days, we can't guarantee that the response will be included in the audit report, but we'll do everything that we can. So if we have a comment, for example, we tested 100 claims and 2 of them didn't have signatures like I used before, and for some reason we included that in the published supplemental report, and you wanted to respond to that and say those 2 didn't get signed because of whatever reason, you were happy the other 98 passed our inspection, something like that. It gives you the chance to respond to any of our comments so that when the report's filed and John Q. citizen out there gets a copy of it and they read what we write up, they can see how you respond to that. Next is a second review that's conducted by the audit coordinator. We have 5 coordinators and 4 exam coordinators who are responsible for the audits, examinations, and special investigations in their assigned counties. After they conduct the second review, the report and audit work papers are forwarded to our office. Then in the office, the financial statement reports are reviewed and then filed by the state examiner. So who gets a copy? Well, once a report is processed in our office and filed by the state examiner, copies are mailed and or emailed to the officials examined, the president of the governing body, and any other officials who request copies. In some cases, the media becomes aware that we're at a unit doing an audit and they'll request a copy of the final report. So we add them to the list and email them the filed public copy as well. A day or two after filing, the reports are available on our website at the link shown, or you can click on the billboard at the top for audit reports on our homepage. And there you can search for different types of reports. So this link that you see in the slide, if you want to type all that in, you can, or you can go to our website, in.gov/SBOA, and there on the homepage you should see, one of those pictures that changes. That's called a billboard. One of them should say audit reports, and you can click on that. And when you do, it'll take you to a site that looks like this. You can type in the name of any unit that you're looking for in this box. It says search. You don't have to necessarily put a county or unit type in, but sometimes that helps narrow it down. So for example, if I typed Pendleton in this box, I would get reports related to the town of Pendleton or the Pendleton Library or anything with the word Pendleton in it. If I was just looking for the Pendleton Library, I could go over here to unit type and say Library Pendleton, and it would narrow that search down. So this should give you what you need. So to conclude, here's our contact information if you have any questions, along with our web address and phone number. And I want to thank you again for taking the time to view this, and we look forward to working with you.